Hey everyone, welcome back to another spine-chilling journey across Asia. Tonight, we're diving deep into something that touches every urban dweller's life: late-night public transportation. Now, if you've ever lived in any major Asian city, whether it's Tokyo, Seoul, Bangkok, Manila, or Hong Kong, you know there's something universally eerie about catching that last bus home. The fluorescent lights flickering overhead, the empty seats that seem to echo with whispers, and that unsettling feeling that you're not quite alone. But here's the thing. Across Asia, from the neon-lit streets of Tokyo to the bustling avenues of Bangkok, there's an unspoken rule that locals have known for generations. Never, and I mean never, take a bus past midnight. It's not just superstition, it's wisdom passed down through countless terrifying encounters that have been documented, reported, and whispered about for decades. See, Asia has this incredible wealth of urban legends and ghost stories, but what makes them truly chilling is how many of them are rooted in real events. We're not talking about made-up campfire stories here. These are incidents that made headlines, police reports, and left entire communities shaken. From buses that vanish without a trace, to passengers who pay their fare with money from the afterlife, the late-night public transport systems of Asia have become gateways to encounters that defy explanation. Tonight, I'm taking you on a journey across 4 different Asian countries, each with their own documented cases of supernatural encounters on late-night buses. We'll explore the famous Beijing Bus 375 incident that shocked China in the 1990s, venture into Japan's haunted transportation network, where ancient spirits collide with modern technology, discover Thailand's cursed routes where malevolent fire spirits prey on midnight travelers, and finally visit the Philippines, where shape-shifting creatures hunt from the shadows. These aren't just stories to scare you. They're cultural phenomena that have shaped how millions of people navigate their cities after dark. They've influenced government policies, changed bus routes, and created protective rituals that are still practiced today. So dim the lights, get comfortable, and remember, after tonight, you might think twice before stepping onto that last bus home. Let's start our journey in Beijing, China, with what is arguably the most famous bus-related urban legend in all of Asia, the case of Bus 375. This story is supposed to be based on true events that occurred on November 14th, 1995, though some versions place it in 1992 or 1993. The story begins like any other cold November night in Beijing. At midnight, Bus 375 pulled out of the Yuan-ming-yuan bus terminus. This was the last bus of the night, and its destination was Xiang-shan or Fragrant Hills. The temperature had dropped below freezing, and a harsh wind cut through the empty streets as the double-decker bus made its way through the city. On board were just the driver and a female conductor, standard for Beijing buses at that time. The bus was nearly empty when it made its stop at the south gate, next to the Summer Palace. When the doors opened, 4 passengers got on: an old lady, a young couple, and a young man. The scene seemed perfectly normal, just late-night travelers trying to get home. But here's where things get interesting. According to the accounts, the young couple sat up at the front, behind the driver, while the old lady and the boy sat on the other side of the bus, beside the doors. What happened next would become one of China's most enduring urban legends. As the bus drove through the cold night, the old woman kept glancing back at the 3 other passengers. Something about them bothered her, though she couldn't put her finger on what. Then the wind picked up, blowing through a partially open window. The old lady saw everything. The wind lifted their long robes and she saw that they had no legs. Terrified, the old woman immediately signaled for the bus to stop. She grabbed the young man sitting nearby and dragged him off the bus with her, claiming there was an emergency. The bewildered young man had no choice but to follow, and together they went to the nearest police station to report what the old woman had witnessed. The next day, Bus 375 failed to report to the station. It had vanished along with the driver and the female conductor. A massive search was launched across Beijing, but for 2 days there was no trace of the missing bus. Then came the discovery that sent shockwaves through the entire city. On the 3rd day, police discovered the missing bus in a water reservoir about 100 kilometers away from its destination, Xiang-shan or so-called Fragrant Hills. Inside the submerged bus were 3 badly decomposed corpses. But the mystery only deepened from there. The bus did not have enough petrol to go that far after a whole day's worth of travel. The fact that the petrol tank was filled with fresh blood instead of fuel left investigators completely baffled. What makes this story particularly compelling is how it spread across China. Stories of the Beijing ghost bus seem to have begun spreading across the internet in China during the 2000s, with the earliest known online version posted to the Chinese internet forum and bulletin board system Tianya Club. The story became so widespread that it influenced popular culture, spawning radio shows, online discussions, and countless retellings. But here's what's truly fascinating about the Bus 375 legend. It represents a broader phenomenon in Chinese culture. During what's known as Ghost Month, which is the 7th lunar month, when Chinese people believe ghosts are released from hell to wander the world for a whole month, stories like these take on special significance. The case of Bus 375 established a pattern that would echo across Asia, late-night public transportation becoming a liminal space where the living and the dead intersect. Whether the events of November 14th, 1995 actually happened as described may never be definitively proven, but the impact on Chinese urban culture is undeniable. To this day, many Beijing residents avoid the last bus on routes that pass near cemeteries or have a history of accidents. The story also introduced the world to the concept of ghost passengers, spirits who board public transportation, often paying with what appears to be real money that later transforms into hell notes, the paper money burned as offerings to the dead in Chinese tradition. Chapter 2. Japan's Supernatural Transit Network. Moving east to Japan, we enter a world where ancient spiritual beliefs collide head-on with ultra-modern technology. Japan's public transportation system is renowned for its efficiency and punctuality, but after midnight, something else entirely takes over the rails and roads. The Japanese have a word for urban legends, Toshi Densetsu, and their transportation network is riddled with them. But what makes Japanese bus and train ghost stories particularly chilling is how they blend traditional yokai or supernatural creatures with contemporary urban settings. Let's start with the story of the Kiyotaki Tunnel in Kyoto. The Kiyotaki Tunnel is a real-life location that is said to be haunted by the spirits of those who died during its construction in the early 1920s. The tunnel connects Kyoto to the town of Takao through the mountains, and its construction came at a terrible human cost. One of the most famous stories involves a bus driver who was driving through the tunnel late at night. As he drove through, he saw a woman standing in the middle of the road with long hair and wearing a white dress. The driver slammed on the brakes to avoid hitting her, but when he got out of the bus to check on her, she had disappeared. But the tunnel incidents don't stop there. Other stories suggest that if you drive through the tunnel at night with your car windows open, you will hear someone tapping on the window. When you turn to look, you will see the ghostly face of one of the tunnel's construction workers staring back at you. What's particularly unsettling about Japanese transportation ghost stories is how they often involve what locals call ghost passengers, spirits that board buses and trains, pay normal fares, and then simply vanish before reaching their destination. Because the passenger typically disappears before reaching the destination, the taxi driver is left to pay the fare themselves. However, those with a strong respect for the dead do not mind paying the fare. These ghost passenger encounters became so common, especially after tragic events, that researchers began studying them scientifically. Yuka Kudo at Tokyo Gakugei University interviewed over 100 taxi drivers in an effort to study the phenomenon, though many refused to answer. Psychiatrist Kaizo Hara and others have suggested that the ghost passengers are grief hallucinations or a sign of collective post-traumatic stress disorder. But Japan's supernatural transit network isn't just about ghosts of the dead. It's also home to creatures from ancient folklore that have adapted to modern settings. Enter Hachishaku-sama, a malefic entity that kidnaps children in Japan. She is recognizable by her giant size, 8 feet tall, and her long black hair. Hachishaku-sama announces her arrival by making a strange noise that sounds like po po po. While not exclusively a bus-related entity, there are documented accounts of Hachishaku-sama appearing near bus stops and transportation hubs, particularly in rural areas where children wait alone for school buses. What makes Hachishaku-sama particularly terrifying is her ability to mimic voices. People seeking protection often use sacred objects, charms, or the guidance of a local spiritual figure, such as a monk or priest, to escape her grasp. A young boy who encounters Hachishaku-sama has to remain indoors or leave the village under strict precautions to avoid being taken. The story of Hachishaku-sama represents how Japan's ancient folklore has evolved to address modern fears. The internet has played a huge role in keeping her legend alive, with countless people retelling her story in their own words. Each new interpretation adds to her myth, ensuring that she remains a relevant and evolving figure of fear. Japan also has its own version of the cursed story phenomenon called gozu or cowhead. Gozu is a Japanese urban legend about a fictional story called Cowhead. The legend states that the story is so terrifying that anyone who hears it dies of fright, and anyone who tells it is also cursed. There are accounts of this story being told on school buses, with devastating consequences for everyone on board. The integration of supernatural beliefs into Japan's transportation culture runs so deep that many buses and trains carry protective amulets, and drivers often perform small rituals before beginning late-night routes. The famous yellow talismans you sometimes see hanging from bus mirrors aren't decorative, they're spiritual protection against exactly the kinds of encounters we've been discussing. Chapter 3. Thailand's Cursed Routes and Hungry Ghosts. As we travel south to Thailand, we enter a spiritual landscape where Buddhism intertwines with ancient animistic beliefs, creating some of the most terrifying public transportation encounters in all of Asia. In Thai culture, ghosts or spirits are known generically as Phai, and a large proportion of these spirits are nocturnal. Thailand's roads and bus routes are particularly dangerous after midnight, not just because of reckless driving or poor visibility, but because of the malevolent spirits that are said to actively hunt for victims during the darkest hours. Let's start with one of Thailand's most feared supernatural entities, the Krasu. The Krasui is a nocturnal female spirit that manifests as the floating, disembodied head of a woman, usually young and beautiful, with her internal organs still attached and trailing down from the neck. By day, she's an ordinary woman who might seem a little reserved and antisocial. At night, she goes out to feed with her internal organs hanging down from her neck. What makes the Krasu particularly relevant to our discussion is her hunting pattern. Krasu is generally harmless, but legend has it that her favorite food is the placenta surrounding a newborn baby. It is also believed that after it feeds, Krasu float around looking for clothes left outside to dry overnight. This means she often follows roads and transportation routes, looking for isolated homes where she can find pregnant women or newborns. Recent documented sightings make the Krasui phenomenon particularly compelling. In mid-October 2023, a series of eyewitness accounts describing sightings of a Krasu began circulating in Lopburi province. At least 3 individuals, including 2 young women and a 70-year-old farmer, reported encounters with the spirit. But it's not just the Krasu that makes Thailand's late-night transportation dangerous. Phai Phong is a foul-smelling ghost who appears as a normal person in the daytime but feeds on unpleasant foods such as frogs, forcing many to stay indoors if they hear the noises of frogs nearby for fear of bumping into him. Then there are the Phai Lang Kluang, spirits particularly associated with southern Thailand's tourist areas. Phi Lang Kluang are ghosts in the south of Thailand who'll join your group and will seem to be normal until they ask someone to scratch their back. Upon doing so, their terrifying secret will be revealed: a gaping wound right through the body, festering with maggots, worms, and millipedes. These spirits are known to board buses and target unsuspecting tourists and locals alike. One of the most documented supernatural hotspots in Thailand is Koh Kam Noi, a small island near Pattaya. During World War II, Koh Kam Noi was a military base for American soldiers. Once the deadly disease of malaria hit, however, many soldiers lost their lives and were buried on the island. There have been reports of ghost sightings and unnatural noises, such as moaning and groaning. What's particularly chilling about Koh Kam Noi is that the only way to reach it is by boat or bus to the ferry terminal, and many of the supernatural encounters happen during the journey to and from the island. Travelers report feeling an overwhelming sense of dread as they approach the island, and some claim to see soldiers in vintage military uniforms boarding buses that serve the ferry routes. Thailand also has its own version of possessed or cursed individuals who become dangerous to public transportation. The concept of Phi Pop represents people who are possessed by malevolent spirits and become cannibalistic. Some even believe that the Pop runs in a cursed family, and there's always one in every generation. There's no cure, and it's up to the family to contain its cursed member to save the clan from humiliation and public shaming. These Phi Pop individuals are said to sometimes board buses late at night, appearing normal until they begin to exhibit signs of their supernatural affliction. They're particularly dangerous because they can maintain their human appearance for extended periods, making them nearly impossible to identify until it's too late. The famous Mae Nak story, while not directly related to buses, has created a cultural context that influences how Thais view late-night travel. Mae Nak was a beautiful girl named Nak who was married to a man named Tid Mak during the reign of King Mongkut from 1851 to 1868. When Tid Mak was called to serve in the army, Nak suffered a fatal complication while giving birth and died along with her child. But due to her deep love for her husband, Nak refused to cross over and instead remained as a ghost in their house. The Nak story has become so embedded in Thai culture that it influences how people view spiritual attachment to specific locations. Many bus routes that pass through areas with tragic histories are avoided after midnight, particularly routes that go near the Phra Kanong district where Nak's story is set. Chapter 4. The Philippines, where ancient curses meet modern transport. Our final destination takes us to the Philippines, an archipelago nation where Spanish colonization mixed with indigenous beliefs and centuries of trade with other Asian cultures to create some of the most complex and terrifying supernatural folklore in the region. The Philippines is home to creatures called aswang, shape-shifting entities that can take many forms, and many of them have adapted to hunt using modern transportation networks. The most famous of these creatures is the manananggal. The manananggal is able to separate its upper torso from the lower part of its body. Their fangs and wings give them a vampire-like appearance. The word manananggal is derived from the Tagalog word tanggal, meaning to remove or to separate. What makes the manananggal particularly relevant to our discussion of late-night transportation is its hunting strategy. During the day, the creature appears as a normal woman, often described as beautiful or unassuming. However, when night falls, particularly under the light of a full moon, the manananggal undergoes a grotesque transformation. It detaches its upper body from its lower half, sprouting large, bat-like wings that allow it to fly in search of its prey. The manananggal is known to follow bus routes, particularly in rural areas, looking for pregnant women traveling alone. What makes the manananggal especially frightening is its hunger for human flesh, particularly that of pregnant women. The creature uses its long, thin tongue to puncture the belly of a sleeping pregnant woman and suck out the fetus. Recent documented encounters make the manananggal phenomenon particularly compelling. In Mindanao, a report of a manananggal attack surfaced in 2021 when a family claimed that a winged creature tried to enter their home, attempting to prey on a pregnant family member. They described seeing a shadowy figure with bat-like wings hovering outside the window. In 2023, villagers in a remote part of Quezon province reported seeing a manananggal flying near the mountains. Several people claimed they saw the creature just after sunset, and livestock deaths in the area were blamed on the manananggal. What's particularly chilling about Filipino supernatural creatures is how they've adapted to modern settings. The manananggal is a type of aswang that is accompanied by a small bird called a tik-tik because of the sound it makes while in flight, although the sound actually gets fainter as it nears. The tik-tik accompanies the manananggal to confuse people. This acoustic deception makes the manananggal particularly dangerous to bus passengers, as the sound of the tik-tik bird can be mistaken for normal night sounds or even the bus engine, masking the approach of the creature. The Philippines also has stories of tikbalang, creatures that have the head and hooves of a stallion but the body of a human. According to those in the north, this odd creature is harmless and doesn't eat babies. Tikbalang find it hilarious to make travelers hallucinate. These creatures are known to cause buses to become lost, driving in circles for hours on routes that should only take minutes. The stories of tikbalang from the south speak of an evil, red-eyed demon horse continuously puffing a cigar. Tikbalang are prone to fits of rage that can end with stomping people to death. Southern tikbalang are said to attack buses directly, particularly those traveling through mountainous regions where they make their lairs. The cultural impact of these creatures on Filipino transportation culture cannot be overstated. To protect themselves from the manananggal's attacks, traditional Filipino communities would place garlic, salt, and other items with supposed mystical properties around their homes and windows. These same protective measures are often used on buses, particularly those serving rural routes. The integration of supernatural beliefs into modern Filipino life is so complete that the myth of the manananggal is widely recognized in the Visayan regions of the Philippines, particularly in the western provinces of Capiz, Iloilo, Bohol, and Antique. Despite the influence of modernization, belief in and reports of encounters with such creatures reportedly persist in certain areas. As we reach the end of our journey across Asia's supernatural transportation network, a pattern emerges that transcends cultural boundaries. From Beijing's ghost bus to Thailand's hungry spirits, from Japan's 8-foot woman to the Philippines' shape-shifting predators, there's something universally terrifying about late-night public transportation in Asian cultures. If you must travel late at night, keep your eyes open, trust your instincts, and whatever you do, don't accept rides from passengers who pay with money that feels too old, too cold, or too much like paper meant for the dead,